The winter of 1951–1952 came early to the Sierra Nevada, and it came hard. By December, mountain communities that were accustomed to heavy snowfall found themselves dealing with something unusual. Snow arrived weeks ahead of schedule, piling up in depths that veteran railroad workers and forestry observers hadn't seen in years. At Donner Pass, where pioneers had once struggled through winter storms a century before, the snowpack was already measuring well above normal levels before the new year arrived. California in the early 1950s depended on the Sierra Nevada in ways that are difficult to imagine today. The mountain range wasn't just a scenic backdrop, it was a critical artery. Highway 40 and the transcontinental railroad lines threading through passes like Donner and Yuba Gap carried freight, mail, passengers, and essential supplies between California and the rest of the nation. In winter, these routes narrowed to a handful of carefully maintained corridors through the mountains. When those corridors closed, entire regions could be cut off. Railroad crews who worked the Sierra routes that winter noticed the warning signs. Snowdrifts were forming faster than plows could clear them. Temperatures were dropping lower than usual, creating hard-packed snow that resisted removal. Weather observers at high-elevation stations recorded storm after storm moving through the region, each one adding another layer to an already dangerous snowpack. By mid-January 1952, the Sierra Nevada had received more snow than it typically saw in an entire winter season. But the worst was still coming. On January 13, 1952, a massive storm system began moving across northern California. Weather stations tracked its approach, but the scale of what was about to unfold caught even experienced forecasters off guard. The storm hit the Sierra Nevada with extraordinary force. Temperatures plummeted, dropping well below freezing across the entire mountain range. Wind speeds climbed rapidly. Anemometers recorded gusts exceeding 100 kilometers per hour before the instruments themselves became encased in ice and failed. Then the snow began. It didn't fall gently or gradually. It came down in thick, wind-driven sheets that reduced visibility to near zero within minutes. The combination of heavy snowfall and hurricane-force winds created conditions that were not just dangerous but nearly incomprehensible to those caught in them. Snow accumulated at rates measured in feet per hour rather than inches. Drifts formed so quickly that roads cleared in the morning were buried by afternoon. Communities throughout the Sierra found themselves isolated almost immediately. Telephone lines snapped under the weight of ice and wind. Power lines came down, plunging towns into darkness. Highway 40, the main east-west route through the mountains, became impassable within hours of the storm's arrival. Snowplows that attempted to keep the road open found themselves fighting a losing battle against drifts that reformed faster than they could be cleared. By the evening of January 13, weather stations were reporting snowfall totals that seemed impossible. Some locations recorded 3 feet of new snow in less than 12 hours, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. The wind howled through the mountain passes with a sound that residents would later describe as terrifying, a constant roar that made conversation impossible and sleep nearly unthinkable. Snow didn't just fall. It was driven horizontally by the wind, finding its way through the smallest cracks in buildings, piling up against walls until structures disappeared entirely beneath white masses that seemed to have no top. Rescue became impossible. Emergency services couldn't reach people who needed help. Towns that were normally connected by an hour's drive found themselves as isolated from each other as if they were on separate continents. And somewhere in the middle of this fury, a passenger train carrying more than 200 people was making its way into the mountains. The Southern Pacific Railroad's city of San Francisco was one of the most famous passenger trains in America, a streamliner that ran between Chicago and San Francisco, carrying business people, families, and mail across the country. On January 13, 1952, the westbound city of San Francisco was approaching the Sierra Nevada on schedule, its passengers unaware that they were heading directly into a catastrophe. The train entered the mountains as the blizzard intensified. Railroad officials were monitoring the situation, but the storm's rapid escalation caught them unprepared. The city of San Francisco pushed forward, its locomotives struggling against deepening snow on the tracks. Near Yuba Gap, about 60 miles east of Sacramento, the train ground to a halt. Snow had buried the tracks ahead, and the locomotive couldn't push through the massive drifts that had formed. Behind the train, more snow was rapidly accumulating, blocking any possibility of backing out. Within hours, the city of San Francisco was completely trapped, invisible from the air, unreachable from the ground, buried in snow that continued to fall at relentless rates. There were 226 people on that train, passengers and crew, and they found themselves in a situation that seemed impossible for modern America. They had heat as long as the locomotive's fuel lasted. They had some food from the dining car, but they had no way out and no one could reach them. The storm raged for days. Each attempt to send rescue trains was blocked by avalanches, buried tracks, or mechanical failures in the extreme conditions. Rotary snowplows, massive machines designed specifically to cut through deep Sierra snow, became stuck themselves. Crews trying to reach the stranded train on foot were turned back by conditions so severe that experienced mountain rescuers described them as suicidal. As news of the trapped train spread, it became a national story. Radio broadcasts updated the country on rescue attempts. Newspapers ran front-page stories about the city of San Francisco and its passengers, stranded somewhere in the white wilderness of the Sierra Nevada. Inside the train, passengers settled into an uneasy routine. The crew rationed food. People shared blankets and tried to keep spirits up. Children who had been excited about the train journey now watched snow pile up past the windows, covering the glass entirely until the cars became dark tunnels lit only by emergency lamps. Days passed, 3, then 4, then 5. The fuel for the locomotive's boiler began running low, which meant the heat would soon fail. Temperatures outside were well below freezing. Inside the buried train cars, people faced the very real possibility that they might not survive. Rescue crews finally reached the city of San Francisco on January 18, 5 days after it became trapped. They arrived on foot, having abandoned their equipment miles back, carrying supplies on their backs through snow that measured over 10 feet deep in places. The evacuation took hours, with passengers and crew members wading through snow tunnels cut by rescuers, many of them suffering from cold and exhaustion but alive. The city of San Francisco wasn't the only train caught by the blizzard. Other locomotives and freight trains found themselves stranded throughout the Sierra. But the city of San Francisco's story captured public attention in a way that defined the disaster. While rescue efforts focused on the trapped trains, the blizzard was causing widespread devastation across Northern California. The storm's impact extended far beyond the Sierra Nevada, affecting hundreds of thousands of people. Highway 40, the main transcontinental route, was closed for weeks. Travelers who had been caught on the road when the storm hit spent days stranded in highway maintenance stations, small-town diners and motels, anywhere that could provide shelter. Some communities became entirely cut off, reachable only by air once the weather cleared enough for flights. The town of Soda Springs, high in the Sierra, reported a snowfall total of 65 feet for the month of January 1952. Residents described looking up at snow walls that towered over two-story buildings. Some homes were buried entirely, with occupants having to dig vertical shafts to reach the surface. Power outages affected communities across Northern California. Transmission lines through the mountains were destroyed by the combination of ice buildup and high winds. Repair crews couldn't reach damaged sections because the roads were impassable. Some towns remained without electricity for more than 2 weeks. The situation became serious enough that California's governor requested military assistance. The U.S. Army mobilized troops and equipment to help with rescue operations and supply delivery. Military aircraft dropped food and medicine to isolated communities. Soldiers with specialized cold-weather training joined civilian rescue teams attempting to reach stranded motorists and check on remote mountain residences. Railroad companies faced their own crisis. Southern Pacific estimated that more than 100 miles of track was buried under snow so deep that locating the actual rail bed became difficult. Avalanches had swept away sections of track entirely, destroying bridges and trestles. The economic impact mounted quickly. Freight couldn't move, passengers couldn't travel, and the repair costs were staggering. Agriculture in California's Central Valley suffered significant damage. While the valley itself didn't receive heavy snow, the storm brought freezing temperatures that destroyed citrus crops and damaged other temperature-sensitive agriculture. The combination of cold and subsequent flooding from rapid snowmelt created conditions that would affect California's farm economy for the entire year. Sacramento, the state capital, found itself partially paralyzed. While the city didn't experience the extreme conditions of the High Sierra, heavy snow and power outages affected government operations at a critical time. State agencies struggled to coordinate relief efforts while dealing with their own infrastructure problems. The blizzard exposed California's vulnerability to severe winter weather. The state had systems in place to handle typical Sierra snowfall, but the 1952 storm exceeded every preparation. Roads built to withstand normal winters were buried under snow depths they'd never been designed to handle. Communication systems failed. Supply chains broke down. The disaster revealed gaps in California's emergency response capabilities that would require serious attention. When the storm finally ended and the full scope of the damage became clear, California faced an unprecedented recovery effort. The final snowfall totals were extraordinary. Donner Summit recorded over 30 feet of snow for January alone. Several locations in the Sierra Nevada measured seasonal snowpack depths exceeding 60 feet, accumulations that remain among the highest ever recorded in the region. The sheer volume of snow created problems that persisted for months. The economic damage was severe. Railroad companies spent millions repairing tracks, replacing equipment, and compensating for lost revenue during the weeks when transcontinental service was suspended. Highway departments faced massive costs to clear roads and repair damage. The citrus industry's losses ran into the millions. Insurance companies dealt with thousands of claims related to the storm. At least 20 people died as a direct result of the blizzard, though the actual number may have been higher. Some deaths occurred during the storm itself: motorists who became stranded and succumbed to the cold, rescue workers killed in avalanches. Other deaths came later, from heart attacks while shoveling snow or from accidents during cleanup operations. The 1952 blizzard changed California's approach to winter weather management in fundamental ways. The state invested heavily in improved forecasting capabilities, recognizing that earlier and more accurate warnings could save lives and reduce economic damage. New weather stations were established throughout the Sierra Nevada. Communication systems were hardened against the kind of failures that had occurred during the storm. Railroad companies redesigned their Sierra operations. Southern Pacific invested in better snow removal equipment and established stricter protocols for when to suspend service rather than risk trapping trains. The company also built additional sidings and emergency shelters along mountain routes, providing refuges for trains caught by unexpected storms. Highway departments developed new strategies for winter road maintenance in the Sierra. Snow removal equipment was upgraded. Emergency supply caches were positioned at strategic locations along major routes. Procedures for closing roads during dangerous conditions were refined, prioritizing safety over maintaining traffic flow. The disaster also influenced California's water management planning. The enormous snowpack that the storm created led to serious flooding concerns when spring melting began. Reservoir operators faced difficult decisions about releasing water to prevent dam failures while avoiding downstream flood damage. The experience informed later decisions about water storage capacity and flood control systems throughout the Sierra Nevada watershed. For communities in the Sierra Nevada, the 1952 blizzard became a dividing line in local history. Events were remembered as happening before or after the big one. Stories of the storm were passed down through generations, shaping the region's culture and collective memory. The 1952 Sierra blizzard wasn't California's last severe winter storm, but it remained one of the worst. Later storms in 1969, 1982, and 2023 brought heavy snow to the Sierra Nevada, but none quite matched the combination of snowfall totals, duration, and widespread disruption that characterized January 1952. What makes the 1952 blizzard historically significant isn't just its meteorological extremes. It's the snapshot it provides of mid-20th century America's vulnerabilities and capabilities. The storm revealed limitations in technology, infrastructure, and preparedness. But it also demonstrated resilience. Rescue workers who risked their lives repeatedly, communities that helped each other survive, passengers trapped on a train who maintained order and hope through days of isolation. The passengers of the city of San Francisco eventually made it to San Francisco, arriving days late but alive. The Sierra Nevada's communities dug themselves out, repaired what had been damaged, and prepared for the next winter. California rebuilt its mountain infrastructure stronger than before. And the snow finally melted, revealing a landscape that had been transformed by forces that no amount of human engineering could fully control. A reminder that sometimes nature still writes the most dramatic stories.